Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Ruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, 26th chapter, entitled The Hellish Planets. And today we're reading from text 12 all the way to 15. So text 12 has a very short purport. 13 and 14 don't have a purport, and 15 has a purport, so we'll speak from text 15 mainly. Evam, text 12. Evam eva maharoravo yatra nipatitam purusham kravyadanama ruravastam kravyena ghatayanti yaha kevalam deham varaha. Translation. Punishment in the hell called Maharorava is compulsory for a person who maintains his own body by hurting others. In this hell, Ruru animals known as Kravyada torment him and eat his flesh. Purport. The animalistic person who lives simply in the bodily concept of life is not excused. He is put into the hell known as Maharorava and attacked by Ruru animals known as Kravyadas. Text 13. Yastvi iha va ugraha pashun pakshino va pranata uparan dhayati tam apakarunam purushader api vigar hitam amutra yamanucharaha kumbhi pake tata taile uparan dhayanti. Translation. For the maintenance of their bodies and the satisfaction of their tongues, cruel persons cook poor animals and birds alive. Such persons are condemned even by the man-eaters. In their next lives, they are carried by the Yamadutas to the hell known as Kumbhipaka, where they are cooked in boiling oil. Text 14. Yastvi iha brahma druk sakala sutra Samyake narake ayuta yojana parimandale tamaramaye tapta khale upari adhastad agni arkabhyam ati tapyamane bhiniveshitaha kshut pipasabhyam cha dayamanantar bahi sharira aste shete Cheshtate vatishtati paridhavati cha yavanti pashuromani tavad varsha sahasrani. The killer of a Brahmana is put into the hell known as Kala Sutra, which has a circumference of 80,000 miles and which is made entirely of copper. Heated from below by fire and from above by the scorching sun, the copper surface of this planet is extremely hot. Thus, the murderer of a Brahmana suffers from being burned both internally and externally. Internally, he is burning with hunger and thirst, and externally, he is burning from the scorching heat of the sun and the fire beneath the copper surface. Therefore, he sometimes lies down, sometimes sits, sometimes stands up, and sometimes runs here and there. He must suffer in this way for as many thousands of years as there are hairs on the body of an animal. And then today's verse, text 15. Yastviha vainija veda pathad anapadi apagataha pakhandam chopagatastam asi patravanam praveshya kashaya praharanti tatrahasa itastato Dhavamana ubhayato dhairas tala vanashi patras chidyamana sarvangoha hato smiti paramaya vedanaya murchitaha pade pade nipatati sva dharmaha pakhandanugatam phalam bhukte. So we'll do the word for word and then the translation and purport. So you can please repeat after me. Yaha, anyone who, do, but, iha, in this life, ve, indeed, nija veda pathat, from his own path recommended by the Vedas, anapadi, even without an emergency, apagataha, deviated, pakhandam, a concocted atheistic system, cha, and, upagataha, gone to, tam, him, asi patravanam, the hell known as Asi Patravan, praveshya, making enter, kashaya, with a whip, praharanti, they beat, tatra, there, ha, certainly, aso, that, itaha, tataha, here and there, dhavamanaha, running, ubhayataha, on both sides, dhare, by the edges, talavana asi patrahe, by the sword-like leaves of palm trees, chidyamana, being cut, sarva angaha, whose entire body, ha, alas, hataha, killed, asmi, I am, iti, thus, paramaya, with severe, vedanaya, pain, murchitaha, fainted, pade pade, at every step, nipatati, falls down, swadharmaha, the killer of his own principles of religion, pakhanda anugatam phalam, the result of accepting an atheistic path, bhukte, he suffers. Translation: if a person deviates from the path of the Vedas in the absence of an emergency, the servants of Yamaraj put him into the hell called Asi Patravan, where they beat him with whips. When he runs hither and thither, fleeing from the extreme pain, on all sides, he runs into palm trees with leaves like sharpened swords. Thus injured all over his body and fainting at every step, he cries out, "Oh, what shall I do now? How shall I be saved?" This is how one suffers who deviates from the accepted religious principles. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. There is actually only one religious principle, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavad pranitam. The only religious principle is to follow the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unfortunately, especially in this age of Kali, everyone is an atheist. People do not even believe in God, what to speak of following His words. The words Nija Veda Patha can also mean one's own set of religious principles. Formerly, there was only one Veda Patha, or set of religious principles. Now there are many. It doesn't matter which set of religious principles one follows. The only injunction is that he must follow them strictly. An atheist or Nastika is one who does not believe in the Vedas. However, even if one takes up a different system of religion, according to this verse, he must follow the religious principles he has accepted. Whether one is a Hindu or a Mohammedan or a Christian, he should follow his own religious principles. However, if one concocts his own religious path within his mind, or if one follows no religious principles at all, he is punished in the hell known as Vrindavan. In other words, a human being must follow some religious principles. If he does not follow any religious principles, he is no better than an animal. As Kali Yuga advances, people are becoming godless and taking up so-called secularism. They do not know the punishment awaiting them in Vrindavan, as described in this verse. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Darati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namah Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarini Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pankam Nagayate Girim Yarkripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinatarana. Before beginning, I'd like to very humbly request for the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas, in particular the senior Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, including His Holiness Bhakti Dev Damodar Maharaj. If you see fit, please kindly allow me to say something suitable for my own purification. We'll just backtrack a little bit before we begin. This chapter is the description of the hellish planets. Any of you remember how many different types of hellish planets are given? 28. So there are 28, and since we began this chapter, we're systematically going through all these hellish planets one by one. And the Bhagavatam is giving a very detailed description of what you should do to end up there. What do you need to have in your application form so that you can gain entrance into these places? And then the Bhagavatam is also saying that once you reach there, what kind of experience you get when you're in that place. So far, since we began, the list of all these hellish planets were in text 7. So today we're doing 12 to 15. So in text 7 there's the full list. There's 28 different types of hells listed there. It's also described in the same chapter that in the universal arrangement there's the subterranean heavenly planets, Atal, Vital, Sutala, Talatal, Mahatala, Patal. And it's actually below these planets that the Narakalokas are situated. So just between Patal Loka and the surface of the Garbhodaka ocean, that's where the Narakalokas are. So these 28 different types of hells are there. And it's also very interesting to take note of is that Yamaraj doesn't actually stay in the hellish planets himself. He resides in Pitriloka. And whoever goes to all the wayward souls that end up in the hellish planets, they actually first go to Yamaraj's place in Pitriloka. That's where they receive the judgment, and then from there they are dispatched to whatever hell is appropriate for whatever sinful reactions they have accumulated. So these 28 hellish planets are there, and so far we've covered 3, and then today from verse 12 to 15 we'll cover 4 more. So there'll be 7 in total today. So the first 3 that we heard about so far is Tamishra, Andha Tamishra, and Raurava. Yesterday we heard about Raurava. So as from today, we hear about text 12 speaks about Maharorava. Punishment in hell called Maharorava is compulsory for a person who maintains his own body by hurting others. In this hell, Ruru animals known as Kravyara torment him and eat his flesh. And Prabhupada is saying in the purport that it's simply by living in the bodily concept of life and hurting others is all it takes. And then one goes to Maharorava. So we heard about Raurava yesterday, and this is Maharorava. So there's a variation, just like there is Tamishra, the first planet is Tamishra, and then Andha Tamishra. So there's some similarity there, but you also see there's some variations also in terms of the severity of the punishment or the severity of the action committed, which causes one to end up in that particular planet. So in a similar way, there is Raurava. So the Ruru animals, which are very rarely found. Yesterday we heard in the verse, they are very rarely seen. They're actually not seen in this world, but they do exist. So Maharorava is the same thing. It's a variation of Raurava, and also there you will find the Ruru animals there, which are going to be giving punishment to the souls who reach Maharorava. But these Rurus, there's a variation. They are called Kravyada. They are known as Kravyada. So maybe there's a variation on the Ruru also. There's not only one type of Ruru. There's the Kravyada also, which is a specific type of Ruru. And you can't bribe the Ruru. I have this experience somehow. Sometimes I get chased by dogs, and then I buy some biscuits and I feed the dogs, and then they become my friend. You can't do this in the hellish planets. Prabhupada is saying in the purport, one is not excused. You can't go there and Ruru biscuit. No, not going to work. You will one gets what they deserve. Jai Shri Gauranitai, Krishna Balaram, Radha Shyam Sundar, Lalita Vishakha ki. So Maharorava, that's number 4. Number 5, Kumbhipaka. And this hell is specifically for those persons who cook animals and birds alive for eating. And then they end up there, and then what happens to them? They also cooked alive in boiling oil. This is Kumbhipaka. Number 6 is Kala Sutra. The killer of a Brahmana goes to this hell called Kala Sutra. And he's burnt from 2 directions by the sun, from above and then from below. Because that planet is made of a copper surface, and it's heated from below. Any of you know, if you're using copper utensils in your deity worship, if you, in the winter, when you're keeping something in the copper utensil for your deity worship, say you have to bathe your deities, so you'll heat up water and you'll keep it in the copper utensil. And you find that actually it keeps the heat very well. In fact, if you heat it too much, you'll find that you won't even be able to touch it. It's too hot. It remains very hot. That's the nature of copper. So this entire hellish planet is made of copper. And it's heated from below. So you can imagine how hot it is. And then there's heat from above also, the sun. So the living entity in that place is burned internally and externally. Externally by these elements and internally by hunger and thirst. And he has to stay there for thousands of years, for as many thousands of years as there are hairs on the body of an animal, is what the Bhagavatam is saying. That's number 6. Number 7, and this is text 15, which we just read today in the purport. Asi Patravan. And this hell is for those who deviate from the Vedas, the path given by the Vedas. If a person deviates from the path of the Vedas in the absence of an emergency, so if there's an emergency, the person may be excused, but this is in the absence of an emergency. There's no valid reason to deviate from the path of the Vedas. So they go there, and then what happens when they end up there? Yamadutas, the servants of Yamaraj, they beat him with whips. Actually, there's a certain number of lashes that a human being can tolerate before he dies from being whipped. I think 100 lashes is enough to kill a human being, I think, something like that. But they're whipped constantly, non-stop. And they don't die because they're already dead. So there's no escape from this situation. And they try to escape. They're being whipped and then they try to escape. But when they escape, what happens is they bump into palm trees. So, what's wrong with palm trees? I come from a country called Mauritius. It's a tropical place. There's beaches, nice palm trees. You can sit under the palm tree. But these are not those kinds of palm trees. These palm trees have leaves that are as sharp as swords. So even as they try to run away, these sword-like palm leaves, they injure the living entity. And in great desperation, the living entity cries, oh, what shall I do now? How shall I be saved? So this is the result of deviating from accepted religious principles. This is Asipatravan. When I was given the service of giving Bhagavatam class, I was thinking, Krishna is very kind, he's merciful, he's very merciful to be giving me an opportunity to study all of this in a little detail, because Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhagyavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasari Paya Bhakti Lata Bij. The Jiva is circumambulating the entire universe a number of times, going up and down from Brahmaloka down to the hellish planets, until it gets the mercy of Guru and Krishna, Guru Krishna Prasari Paya, and then that's the chance to actually break out of this cycle. So it's pretty much a certainty that I've probably been there, and I've probably spent a lot of time there, and I've probably visited those places a number of times. So Krishna is very kind. He's allowing me to study all this, and he's giving me an opportunity to understand. Don't go back there again. It's not a nice place, as we hear from the descriptions. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying there is actually only one religious principle. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavad pranitam. The only religious principle is to follow the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this reference is to 6th canto, which is coming up soon. 3rd chapter, verse 19, that's the verse. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavad pranitam. And who speaks this verse? Is Lord Yamaraj himself. Because actually what happens is that this is the story of a Jamil. The Yamadutas, they come to get a Jamil, and then the Vishnu Dutas, they appear at that very moment on the spot. And there is this discussion that happens. It goes back and forth, and the Yamadutas are unsuccessful. They are not able to take Ajamil with them. So they go back to Yamaraj. And then when they go back to Yamaraj, they are bewildered. They are confused. They say to Yamaraj that we thought you were the supreme and that there is no higher judge above you. Now what is this? And these Vishnu Dutas, they look so beautiful and they're very powerful and highly intelligent, and we couldn't argue with them. They took away Ajamil, and we went to get him on your order. You sent us. We're your order carriers. We're your servants. And still we were unsuccessful. So they started having doubts. What's going on? Is our Lord, is Yamaraj the Supreme Person? And, what's happening here? There's something not right. Are there many judges? Are there a few judges? Is there not only one judge? And if there are a few different judges, then there's no justice system in the universe. It's just arbitrary. Some will get punished, some will not get punished. So then Yamaraj, he begins to instruct his messengers, and he begins to clarify all their doubts. And when Yamaraj is clarifying all their doubts, the first thing he says is, I'm not the Supreme Person. There's Lord Vishnu, he's above me. And then he speaks about Dharma, the real Dharma, the one Dharma, Dharma to Sakshat Bhagavat Pranitam, which is to follow the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now what is that order? So if you go to that verse and you look at the purport, and in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he explains what the actual meaning of Dharma to Sakshat Pranitam is. Is it possible to switch off the two fans just above me, because all my papers are flying everywhere? I can't look at them properly. In the purport, Prabhupada is saying, herein it is stated that the real religious principle is that which is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This principle is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja, 1866. One should give up all other duties and surrender unto the lotus feet of Krishna. That is the real religious principle everyone should follow. Even though one follows Vedic scriptures, one may not know this transcendental principle, for it is not known to everyone. And as a matter of fact, the Yamadutas didn't actually know it. The Yamadutas knew the Vedas. It's not that they didn't know the Vedas. They knew the Vedas. But the Vedas do not comprise only of transcendental subject matters. There's also Karma Kanda, there's also Jnana Kanda, there's elements in the Vedas that are not exactly transcendental. They are meant for, you could say, gradual elevation through the path of enjoyment, Karma Kanda. So here, it's being made clear that the real religious principle, the transcendental religious principle, is surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it is not known to everyone, it's very rare. So we're actually very fortunate to be in contact with the Guru Parampara. It's actually a confidential thing. Yamaraj himself is telling the Yamadutas, it's confidential. The vast majority of personalities, human beings, don't actually know what is real Dharma. And this is what Prabhupada is saying here. To say nothing of human beings, even the demigods in the upper planetary systems are unaware of it. This transcendental religious principle must be understood from the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly, or from His special representative, as stated in the next verses. So, Sarva dharman parityaja. And 2 verses later, that's verse 19, 6.3.19. 2 verses later, then Yamaraj himself clarifies even more specifically what is this Sarva dharman parityaja, what actually it is. And can you guess what Yamaraj says? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. It's as clear as that, it's straightforward. Yamaraj is saying. This is the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The surrender unto Supreme Personality is exactly this. It begins with the chanting of the holy name. This is Sevan Mukhe H.G.Vaikuntha. This is the very beginning. So, it's interesting to note Prabhupada is saying in the purport, formerly there was only one Vedpat or set of religious principles, and now there are many. So, an analogy can be used to explain why this has come about. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that a particular thing, which is called in Sanskrit a vastu, has two things, Swabhav and Nisharga. Swabhav means its inherent nature, its permanent nature. And Nisharga is a temporary transformation of the character of that object. So a temporary nature, you can call it a temporary nature. And the term he uses is the Nitya Dharma and Naimitika Dharma. Nitya Dharma is the permanent quality, and the Naimitika Dharma is the temporary quality. So the analogy can be used as that of water and ice. See, the natural quality of water, the dharma of water is what? It's liquidity. It's liquid by nature. But if you take that same water and you keep it in a fridge, in the freezer for a certain amount of time, what happens? It turns into ice. That is the Naimitika Dharma, that is the Nisharga. The Swabhav, the actual nature, is liquidity. And the acquired nature, or the temporary nature, is solidity, ice. And it's a very interesting point. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that this Swabhav goes into hiding, and this Nisharga, this temporary nature, comes about by the force of circumstances or by contact with another substance. So for example, if you take water alone will remain liquid. When it comes in contact with sub-zero temperature in your freezer, it comes in contact with another substance. That substance causes the character to change and to become something that it isn't naturally. It causes it to become ice. But it's not permanent. As soon as you remove the alien substance, it will revert back to its original nature. So as soon as you remove the cold temperature, what happens to the ice? It goes back to being liquid. It goes back to being liquid. So it's temporary. And we make the mistake of thinking that temporary character, the temporary situation is permanent. Why? Because it's been like this for a very long time. You know, if you keep water in the freezer for a very long time and it becomes stable, so we start thinking because it's become stable, you know, this is the nature of water. So somebody comes and says, my dear sir, can you explain to me what is the nature of water? And then he will say, oh yes, it's something, it's a substance that is very cold and very hard, and you know, if you throw it onto a glass window, you can break glass with it. He'll say all these things that are actually wrong. That's not the nature of water. You know, if somebody says that to you, you'll say, no, what you're saying is false. This is not truth. Water is not, these are not the properties of water. But because it's been like that for a long time, and it's acquired this nature, we begin, and it's stable. You know, stable means that there's a time in between. When you start freezing water, in the beginning it's liquid, and in the end it's completely solid. But there's a time in between which is it's in between both. You know, if you take out the bottle and you shake it, you'll see there's a mixture of, you know, bits of ice as well as water, you know, sloshing about. So as you shake it, you'll see there's a mixture of two. So it's been like that for long enough that it completely changed. It became completely solid. What is this analogy describing? It's describing the living entity, the Jiva. The Jiva's intrinsic nature, eternal nature, is Jivara Swarup Hoy Nityara Krishna Das, the servant of Krishna. And that is the Nitya Dharma, that is the Swabhav, that is the actual permanent. It's a permanent nature. It's not that it's something that is lost and then acquired again, or something that is acquired by the process of sadhana. No. Shravanadi Shudachite Karaya Uday. Nityasira Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunai. So it's not even that the sadhana is giving prema or is giving, it's already there. It's Karaya Uday. It's awakening it. That's the permanent feature of the Jiva. And in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, as it is, Srila Prabhupada is saying, every living being has an eternal relationship with Krishna in one of the 4 rasas or 5 rasas. But it's just that that relationship has been forgotten. And the process of sadhana is to reawaken it. In much the same way as water never ever loses its liquidity. Even when it becomes ice, it never loses the capacity to be liquid. Because the proof is that as soon as you take it out of the cold temperature, as soon as you take it out of the fridge, it goes back. Because if it had lost it, then it wouldn't have been possible for ice to go back to being water, right? Makes sense? So it never lost it. It just went into hiding. It got covered. It got covered over by an acquired nature. So in a similar way, the Jiva, the living entity's eternal nature, permanent nature, is to be a servant of Krishna. But it gets covered over by contact with an alien substance. What is that alien substance? Just like water comes in contact with an alien substance, which is the cold temperature. And then that causes its character to change and then to become stable and remain like that. So what is this alien substance that we have come into contact with? Matter. Bahiranga Shakti. The material energy. When the Jiva comes in contact with the material energy, the Jiva's eternal nature becomes covered, and the Jiva seems to acquire a nature. and therefore, the Jiva begins to think, I have all these other dharmas. Naimitika dharma. Karmakand, this, that, But factually, these dharmas are temporary. And even varnashram is temporary because it has to do with the body. It has nothing to do with the Jiva. Varnashram has nothing to do with the Jiva. It has only to do with the body. As soon as you change your body, your varnashram dharma will change again. If in this birth one is a kshatriya, and in the next birth one becomes a shudra, the dharma has changed. So how can you say this is permanent? It's not permanent, it's temporary. So this is the dharma, and the dharma of the Jiva is the chanting of the holy names. The devotional service begins with the chanting of the holy names. So when Prabhupada says formerly there was one and now there is many, what is actually implied here is not necessarily that there are many dharmas. Dharma is one. And this single dharma can be expressed according to different cultural media. And you'll see that actually Prabhupada is being very, very liberal in this purport. Those who actually give up following the Vedas, and if you actually look at the real meaning of the word here, it's Nija Veda Pathat. And the translation is from his own path, recommended by the Vedas. So even within the scope of Vedic literature, there's the scope of one following one's own path. And as long as one is doing that, it's good enough. It's keeping them out of this Asipatravan. It's keeping them out of hell. So obviously the ultimate dharma, the one single dharma, is service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But even those who are not prepared to take that up, but who are still within the scope of instructions given in the Vedic literatures, whether it's Karma Kanda or Jnana Kanda, they are following a pious life. They are avoiding sinful activity. So they are protected from going to this particular hellish planet. But Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he takes it even further. He actually says, even religious systems outside of the Vedas, he talks about even if one is Muhammadan or Christian, what should they do? They should follow their path very strictly. Why is that? Because even if Kala, Desha and Patra can be different, even if we're talking about different time, place and circumstances, the dharma of the jiva is always one, is to love and serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is supposed to be the dharma of the Christians and the dharma of the Muhammadans as well. And this is why Srila Prabhupada is saying, if one is actually following Christianity strictly, or is following Islam strictly, it's good enough. It keeps them out of this hellish planet. So, I can read to you from the journey of self-discovery. This is what Prabhupada is saying. The Bhagavatam does not mention that the Hindu religion is first class, or the Christian religion is first class, or the Muhammadan religion is first class, or some other religion is first class. The Bhagavatam says that religion is first class, which helps one advance his devotional service and love of God. That's all. That is the definition of a first class religion. We do not analyze that one religion is first class or that another religion is last class. Of course, there are three qualities in the material world: goodness, passion and ignorance. And religious conceptions are created according to these qualities. But the purpose of religion is to understand God and learn how to love God. Any religious system, if it teaches one how to love God, is first class. Otherwise, it is useless. One may prosecute his religious principles very rigidly and very nicely, but if his love of God is nil, if his love of matter is simply enhanced, then his religion is no religion. So, it's very interesting. The principle remains the same. The conversation between Srila Prabhupada and Father Emmanuel, and Prabhupada is saying, yes, in the animal kingdom. So Father Emmanuel is asking, Krishna cannot give permission to eat animals? And Srila Prabhupada is saying, yes, in the animal kingdom. But the civilized human being, the religious human being, is not meant to kill and eat animals. If you stop killing animals and chant what? The holy name of Christ, everything will be perfect. I have not come to teach you, but only to request you to please chant the name of God. The Bible also demands this of you. So let's kindly cooperate and chant. And if you have a prejudice against chanting the name Krishna, then chant Christo or Krishna. There is no difference. Sri Chaitanya said, Now Namakari Bahuda, Nija Sarva Shaktis. God has millions and millions of names, and because there is no difference between God's name and Himself, each one of these names has the same potency as God. Human life is meant for self-realization, to learn how to love God, is what Prabhupada is saying. So, what's the problem? We've understood that Dharma is one. The living entity has only one Dharma. It may be expressed in different ways according to time, place and circumstance. But the Dharma is one, is to serve God, to learn to love God, primarily by the chanting of the holy names, regardless of which culture one is in. Prabhupada is himself saying this. But what's the problem? The problem is that nowadays we're dealing with two things: atheism and concocted religious systems. And those are the two things, either of them or a combination of the two. Those are the two things which actually cause people to be on the path of hell. It's very interesting. I was doing some research. It said actually that up until the 4th century, Christians were actually still very much following the original teachings of Jesus Christ. Original Christians are actually supposed to be non-violent. They're supposed to be vegetarian. And they were actually following that, the original Christians, right up until the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine in history, it's described, he made Christianity a state religion. And then what did he do? Because he himself had no sense control, he understood that he was deviating. So what did he do? He decided to change the religious system to suit his deviation. Instead of him conforming to the actual teachings of Jesus Christ, he decided to change that. And therefore it became not only optional, but it became compulsory for Christians to eat meat. And it is said that those who wouldn't eat meat, the Emperor Constantine, he ruled in such a way that they would pour molten lead down their throats. So they were actually forcing Christians to eat meat. The original Christians weren't actually eating meat. There's another example of deviation. 1534, Catholic Church. Actually, right up until that point, the Catholic Church, divorce was illegal in the Catholic Church. It was pretty dharmic. But the King of England, Henry VIII, he had a problem with that. Why? Because he already had a legitimate wife, but he wanted a mistress. And he actually wanted to give up his wife and marry the mistress. Now the Catholic Church wouldn't allow that. So what did King Henry VIII do? He broke away from the Catholic Church. He created his own church, which we call the Church of England nowadays, which is spread all over the world, the Anglican Church. That's the foundation of the Anglican Church, is a king who wanted to give up his wife for a mistress and marry a mistress. And in the end, what he did was he broke away, he created a new church, and he forced the priests to swear him in as the head of the church. And what business does a king have being the head of a church? But no, he became the head of a church. And obviously now in this church, divorce is legal, So, and then the king goes ahead, and then in his entire lifetime, he married like 6 different wives. So, deviation from the verse itself is saying, apagataha pakhandam. Pakhandam means concocting a religious system. Those who do this go to Asipatravan. And the problem in Kali Yuga is this. We're dealing with atheism and concocted religious systems. Even in the name of religion, people are killing each other. In the name of religion, there's no religion that teaches that you should not love your neighbor. Prabhupada said it himself. This is your interpretation. Jesus Christ never said thou shalt not, he said thou shalt not kill. You're changing it. You're saying thou shalt not murder. You're saying, it doesn't apply to human beings. Killing animals is allowed. No, you're interpreting it, Prabhupada said. This is not what Lord Jesus taught. So, deviations are rife in Kali Yuga. And as a result of this, everybody's on the pathway to hell. And the final point is, one can wonder, well, what's the reason for these deviations to come about? Why is this actually happening? And it could be said that the reason why these deviations come about is because, human beings are imperfect. We're conditioned souls. We have 4 defects. A tendency to be illusioned, to make mistakes, to cheat others, and to have imperfect senses. And it's natural, it's to be expected that there are mistakes. It's to be expected that there will be mistakes, there will be shortcomings, there will be weaknesses. The problem is when a weakness is not recognized as a weakness. And there's an entire new philosophy created simply to rationalize the weakness, to justify the weakness, to justify the deviation. That's the root of all these different deviations. And it's very interesting because I was looking into the history a little bit, and as we said here, the deviation, the pervasive deviation, minor deviations are always there, even in the presence of the Acharya, even in the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there may be here and there deviations. But a major deviation that actually causes the entire philosophy to get lost, to get covered. It's interesting because, history says that it happened like 300 to 400 years after the departure of Jesus Christ. And it's very interesting because as I was reading through Vedabase yesterday, I saw a Back to Godhead article of Her Grace Mula Prakriti Maharaji. She was speaking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It's not that Gaudiya Vaishnavas are, immune from deviation. We face any religious system, any bona fide authorized religious system faces the same risk, including Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And the proof is that in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time, there were 13 different upper sampradayas, Sakibekis, Gauranga Nagaris, and so on. There's a whole list. So, and it's interesting, Mula Prakriti Maharaji was saying, that was around 300 to 400 years after Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left. So it seems that any authorized religious system has a kind of more or less safe period where, things are kind of okay, maybe 200, 300, 400 years. But one needs to be really, really careful to preserve the legacy of what has been given, so that later on, further down the line, things do not get distorted. And that's actually the responsibility of each individual devotee in ISKCON. Yes, when leaders deviate, it causes a great disturbance, and they take a lot of people with them. Like King Henry created a whole new church. He took half of the world with him. So leaders have the greatest responsibility to actually be loyal to the teachings of the Gaudiya Parampara of Srila Prabhupada. But it's not just the leaders. We all actually have this responsibility to take it very seriously. So we've gone over time. We're 3-4 minutes over time. I don't know if we have time for questions. Probably not. But thank you very much for your attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai.